ID card confirmed. Morgaine Dominaire. Quest accessed. Closing a pseudo-lord ranked gate of Dracoblins. Quest has been completed. Here's your card completion. Exchange this at the Ascension Academy, and you'll get the rewards for the quest. The words left the lips of the Lady Nagas as two figures, a golden-haired lady and a snow-white-haired young man, stood within the premises of a rather large establishment. On the other side of the area lay an array of spacecraft. A soft hum escaped Morgaine's lips as she took the card from the Nagas. It soon disappeared from her fingers, stored in her spatial ring. The Nagas then turned her attention to Ryuk. Please, can you reveal your identity card for checkup? The Lady Nagas asked, shifting her attention to Ryuk, who raised an eyebrow. Ha! Your identity card. The one you used to get in here in the first place. I just need to scan it and confirm. It's pretty basic protocol, she said once more. I didn't get in here with an ID card, Ryuk replied, earning raised eyebrows from both the Lady Nagas and Morgaine herself. Well then, how did you get in? Did you sneak in? Morgaine asked, voicing the question that lingered on the Lady Naga's lips. Ryuk simply shrugged. I came in with Arthur Pendragon. The Lady Nagas rapidly typed on her device before a loud AI sound echoed throughout the area. Presence scan completed. Image matches. Please, what is your name? The Lady Nagas asked. Ryuk. Correct. The system confirms you truly came in with Arthur Pendragon, who seems to have already returned. Should I help you get to him? The only way to really leave here is through an authorized jet, and according to the registered information we have, only Arthur possesses one. Since he is no longer available. She trailed off, waiting for Ryuk's response. But before he could answer, she was waved off. No need. He's with me, Morgaine replied. The Lady Nagas nodded. We hope to see you here soon. With that, both of them moved on to the airport, where hundreds of jets were currently stationed. After a bit of walking, they arrived in front of quite a peculiar one. A golden-colored jet, without a doubt the sleekest and most powerful-looking design among the rest of the spaceships. The hatch of the spaceship opened up, a storm of white air puffing out as Morgaine took his hand before he could react. They both went in, and the hatch soon closed behind them. Golden energy began undulating off the jet as various runic lines appeared all over its body, lighting up with golden energy before. The jet suddenly disappeared from where it formerly was, a storm of powerful air blasting across the area, strong enough to cause even some of the other jets to move a few inches back from the sheer force. Soon, it had vanished into the clouds, the only proof of its existence being the remnants of golden energy left behind. Welcome back, Morgaine. The AI voice resounded through the pilot room as soon as Morgaine entered. A couple of holographic panels appeared in the space, and Morgaine's hands got to work, rapidly typing on them and sending commands under Ryuk's curious stare. Drop location confirmed. Fallen Manor, Grade C. The AI voice rang out, causing Ryuk to purse his eyebrows as Morgaine moved to a sofa at the side, pressing a button on the armrest. Suddenly, a circular hole appeared in the floor, revealing a table holding a mug and some cups. A second sofa appeared opposite her. Grade C? I thought we ought to head back to the academy, Ryuk questioned as he moved to sit opposite her, looking at Morgaine, who lazily shrugged her shoulders. We third years are free to remain outside for a week after a successful mission completion. I'll just go home and return back after a week to drop the quest card and obtain the rewards. Which I guess belong to you, since you were the one who completed the quest, right? Morgaine asked. The steaming hot tea was poured into both cups, and Ryuk picked his up, raising it in the air before taking a sip. It was quite the sweet liquid, a good break from Mad White's crazy burning throat drink. No, I didn't complete the quest, you did. That monster had already lost 90% of his energy when I came in. It was just as tired as you were then. And I have no need for whatever reward it will be, Ryuk replied. Anyway, you're going home, right? Ryuk asked, to which Morgaine nodded. So why Grade C? I thought the Eclipse Citadel was in Grade B? or have the fallen angels moved location? Ryuk asked, puzzled. If Morgaine said she was going home, it ought to be her home, the Eclipse Citadel, which he remembered was in Grade B. But she had given the ship an order to fly to Grade C instead. So that raised the question, had the Eclipse Citadel been moved to Grade C? One had to know. The Eclipse Citadel was one of the most powerful locations and the central base of the devilish fallen angel race. If it had suddenly moved to Grade C, then that meant something must have gone wrong. Something pretty big for a top-ranked race like the fallen angels to change their location to a seemingly lower standard city. No, not home. More of my own personal home, Morgaine replied, bringing a bit of relief to Ryuk. Grade A doesn't permit residential living. Not like I would have wanted a place besides the Ascension Academy. And Grade B? Well, it's too close to the Eclipse Citadel, and I need my space. So I ended up choosing a quiet place in Grade C. A pretty high-grade city, but not as popular as Grade B, which took the spotlight. That gives it quite the good, peaceful vibe I needed. Hence my decision. She explained further, and Ryuk understood. It was just as Arthur had explained to him. According to him, he also had a personal home of his own and a jet too, something stated when they were talking about the benefits of the academy earlier. So what about you, Ryuk? What have you been doing? When did you return? Or wake up? Seems like someone didn't fall for the coma explanation? Ryuk said with a grin as Morgaine rolled her eyes. I already knew it was fake once I heard that green-haired bastard say it. She harumphed coldly, remembering the meeting that had taken place for the explanation of the absence of the top 10 human. Ryuk had already informed her before leaving that he would be going on some training. But then the coaches mentioned he was in a coma. She immediately sensed something was wrong, although back then, she had thought it was the academy's explanation for Ryuk being dead, while trying not to scare the students. It was just as I told you. It was a simple trial. Does a simple trial take 2 years, you dickhead? Morgaine shot back angrily, making Ryuk feel a chill run down his spine. Of course not. 2 years really haven't passed for me. Ryuk replied, causing Morgaine to raise an eyebrow. It's only been 6 months in the trial. When I came back, Mad White told me 2 years had already passed, which is really weird. A time dilation trial? Morgaine mused under her breath, earning a nod from Ryuk. Still, 6 months isn't. I'll be back soon. You dickhead, Morgaine roared out loud at him, golden light bursting from her eyes in anger. And in the next instant, boom, a golden punch slammed into Ryuk's face, sending him rolling off the sofa before crashing into the wall once more. TCH. Morgaine clicked her tongue in displeasure as Ryuk slowly rose from the ground, his hand shifting to his nose and twisting it back to its normal position. As brutish as ever. You haven't changed one bit, Ryuk said with a helpless smile before rising to his feet. Still, are you fine, Ryuk? Any hidden injuries or problems? Don't lie, Morgaine said as Ryuk looked at her seemingly worried expression and couldn't help but roll his eyes. Of course, I'm not fine. My nose is broken after all, Ryuk said sadly, causing an eye roll from Morgaine, who moved back to the seat before the jet controls, looking at the wheezing clouds. I guess you're fine then, Morgaine said before sitting silently on the sofa, watching the clouds pass by. A bit of silence filled the room as Ryuk returned to his seat, sipping the sweet liquid with a stifled expression. But when he turned to look at Morgaine, he saw her seemingly huddled into herself. What's wrong with her? She still finds it hard to come to terms with the reality of Host being alive. Almost like the sensation of being close to death and then suddenly living once more, which she's at the same time also feeling. It's something that will take some time to get used to, the system explained, making Ryuk relax his eyebrows. But then, boom, the entire jet shook heavily as everything thumped into the sky. What the? Morgaine said in shock as she felt the jet almost tilt out of control. But with a few button presses, it quickly regained its footing. She turned behind her and found a 7-meter-tall hulking creature whose aura sent shivers down her spine. Is that? Morgaine said in shock, her spear summoned into her hands, bursting with incredibly golden energy. The creature before her was an A-grade beast, a beast comparable to Cataclysm stage experts. But then, she couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity as the beast's claws tapped twice on Ryuk's shoulder before moving away from him and walking toward her. "Don't worry, it's Isha," Ryuk said with a shrug. Isha looked at Morgaine, from her face to her legs, before one of her claws stretched out, rubbing Morgaine's braided golden hair. She cackled evilly, making Morgaine back off from her, now able to see the clouds clearly from this height. "Wow, she seems very mature compared to the last time I saw her," Morgaine said, swallowing slightly as she slowly withdrew her spear. "When did she become a grade? And she's so strong. Does she still listen to you?" Morgaine asked. Isha turned her gaze toward Morgaine, then pointed her claw at Ryuk before slowly moving it around her neck, smiling sinisterly right after. "Did she just say she will kill him?" "Hey, Ryuk, I think Isha is planning on killing you," Morgaine said, alarmed, as Ryuk chuckled while Isha grinned mockingly at Morgaine. "Yeah, she tries that all the time. It's a miracle I always manage to survive every time." "Well, what if she succeeds one day?" Morgaine asked. "I guess I'll be dead then?" he replied, causing Morgaine's face to pale, almost like she had lost a few years from that conclusion. "Wait, you're messing with me, right?" she asked as Ryuk rolled his eyes before coming to sit beside Isha, reclining against her side. "Yes, I am." You dickhead," Morgaine roared as she readied her punch, but a side glance from Isha made her unconsciously halt her attack. Realization dawned on Ryuk as he smiled smugly. Now he knew a way to make sure Morgaine wouldn't take her anger out on him. "Actually, I'd be more willing to believe gravity doesn't exist than to believe Isha will kill me one day. Even if she suddenly evolves and becomes a god tomorrow, she'll still be my Isha. Power doesn't change that fact," Ryuk said before a thought flashed in his head. Well, I hope not anymore. The memories of how Isha had beaten the shit out of him when she evolved were still fresh in his mind. There was no telling what would happen if Isha evolved once more and suddenly arrived at the stage of eternity. Would she once more feel he was unworthy of her and fight him? Or would she be able to ignore the increase in power and appreciate their bond instead? Ryuk was more confident in the second choice. He and Isha had gone through so much now that something as simple as her growing stronger than him couldn't destabilize them. But still, there was no telling what could really go wrong. "I just pray your confidence holds till the end of time. It'll be really bad if it doesn't, as a Grade A beast can cause some pretty devastating amounts of destruction in a place like Grade C," Morgaine said under her breath. "Don't sweat it. Isha won't be bothered by that. And what's with you and the weird mission ranking anyway? 7,000 missions, most of them on the insanity level. Were you trying to get yourself killed?" Ryuk asked her, to which Morgaine humphed with pride. "How else would I make sure I can put you in your place if I didn't try and grow strong as fast as I can? Just didn't expect you to have gotten such a strong guardian. That still won't save you from my wrath, though," Morgaine said, giving an eye glance to Isha, who shrugged while continuing to stare dreamily at the clouds. She didn't know why, but Morgaine felt the frost wyvern loved the feeling of the jets weaving through the clouds. Suddenly, "We have successfully arrived at our destination. Fallen Manor, Grade C. Please prepare for disembarkation in 5, 4. The weird countdown suddenly began as Ryuk turned to look at Morgaine, seeing her flashing a slight evil, revengeful smirk. He finally understood the reason when suddenly, the seats began retreating into the ground. In the next instant, the ground beneath Ryuk suddenly opened up, and he witnessed Morgaine soaring downwards. But then, some jetpacks suddenly appeared behind her as she smiled evilly, watching Ryuk and Isha rapidly plummet toward the ground while hovering in the air, waving them goodbye. "I hope you don't fall to your death." She cackled loudly, but then, Isha suddenly stretched out her claws, and an ice nail was formed before. The sound of the air barrier ripping apart rang out as the nail appeared before Morgaine's forehead with speed. And just when she thought it would drill in, the nail took a sudden curve and pierced into the jetpack behind her. Boom! It immediately exploded, sending Morgaine flying downward with speed, soon surpassing Ryuk and Isha, who waved at her from above while giggling to each other. "TCH! You dickhead bastards!" Morgaine screamed at them, but she had no choice but to regain focus when she felt the immense pull toward the ground. If she fell like this, breaking a few bones was within the limits of possibility, something she'd rather avoid. Therefore, her golden spear reappeared in her hands as she rapidly began revolving it with speed. The more the revolution, the more Morgaine's pull massively reduced. And when she got closer and closer to the ground, the pull was almost already gone as she reeled her spear about 10 meters away, curling herself into a ball and rolling on the ground a couple of times before she finally came to a stop on the greenery grass. "I survived, with no injuries too," Morgaine said. But then she looked up and found a big creature gently gliding in the air playfully. On its back sat a figure, his spine somehow rigid as a pine. His chest stuck out with pride, overlooking Morgaine as if she were lesser than an ant. Isha rolled in the air a couple of times before she gently landed on the ground. Ryuk swerved down its back, sliding down Isha's tail before landing before Morgaine. "Need a little help, young girl?" he asked, but Morgaine slapped his hands away and rose to her feet, wobbling a few times before finally coming to a stop. "You won't get away with this. I promise you, dickhead," Morgaine huffed before storming off. "You might have outdone it a bit, Isha," Ryuk said, turning his furrowed gaze at Isha, who cackled evilly before waving her claws away at Ryuk when she saw his expression. "Oh, come on. She wouldn't die even if she fell from the clouds. Just a few broken bones is all. And she even managed to avoid that," Isha said with a smirk, and Ryuk could only roll his eyes. "Still, she has quite the good taste in a peaceful place," Isha said as Ryuk finally turned his attention to the surroundings. They somehow seemed to be on some type of incredibly high ground, and all around Ryuk was nothing but an endless area of grass. He saw Isha jogging into the distance and sprinted after her. After 5 minutes of jogging, they finally arrived at the edge of the hill, and before them was an endless sea. Blue in color, but with the setting sun, Ryuk could see a few golden lines running across the surface of the blue sea, creating an incredibly beautiful sight. "Wow!" he unconsciously said in surprise, the gentle breeze in the area sending his hair and clothes flapping wildly. A mini castle building stood on top of the hill, surrounded by an endless plain of grass, with a blue-golden sea just beneath it. It truly was a perfect place for one to get away from the harshness of reality. Ryuk slowly sat down at the edge, his eyes overlooking the entire sea from the area as he inhaled deeply and exhaled. Perhaps it was all worth it in the end, he mused to himself, his gaze traveling to the days when he had first wanted to embark on that trial. It had a 99% chance of taking his life, and he had been very reluctant. But in the end, he had undergone it, grew his strength, strengthened his bonds with Isha, and when he returned, he had been able to save Morgaine and ensure she still lived. In the end, he didn't have to sacrifice everything for that, even though he had thought he would have lost everything. In the end, wasn't all that pain worth it? No, it was very well worth it. "So what will you do now, Ryuk?" Isha suddenly asked. Ryuk turned his gaze to the side, finding Isha lowering herself, her gaze fixed on the endless sea. "You know, I might not have really liked that place we came from before, but I can say we did have quite the adventure. You still remember when your ass almost got stung to death by the bees? You looked absolutely pathetic." Hehe, Isha recalled as Ryuk laughed out loud. "Yes, Isha. Yes, I do. And I also remember when you ran so fast away from that rattleconda, sweat pouring down all over your scaly face. It was like you had seen your worst horror." Ryuk shot back. Isha remembered the running she had done from the Rattleodna and couldn't help but giggle. "Yes, Ryuk. As hellish as that place was, there was still a sense of adventure, you know? We were doing something. But now we've gotten back to the academy. Time has passed so fast, and you're so ridiculously strong. I don't feel any challenge at all ever since we arrived back here. It's like we're at the top of the food chain now," Isha said. Ryuk turned his gaze back to the sea and nodded his head. "You're right, Isha. That feeling of your life being in danger can be pretty intoxicating, you know? Now that it's gone, it feels like I've lost something really dear, Ryuk replied. He could feel it too, although when he had arrived, he had faced the Nulls and infiltrated the base. He had still gotten that bit of a feeling of danger. But the more he thought about it, the more he felt it was all slowly slipping away. Now, he was as strong as a Cataclysm stage expert. One could even say he was one of the strongest on Endearth right now. With the absence of immediate danger and fear, it brought the question of what to even do with his life. But he also knew he wasn't completely lost. Right now, Isha, Ryuk said telepathically as Isha turned her gaze to him. Right now, I need to find one null. A null? Isha asked and Ryuk nodded. Yes, a null. A pretty special one, and I need to get rid of it. Since it's so strong, or at least as I saw it back then, I think it should be able to tell me what to do next. Ryuk mused to himself. He knew well that the more one grew in power, the more intelligence one possessed, and he could guess the same was true for the nulls. That null attack on his settlement, Grade A, was definitely not a random attack. It was targeted at Uncle Bob. So, if Ryuk eventually met that bird null, he should be able to siphon some answers from it. When he did that, he would have achieved one of his major goals and even have a clear path on where to go next. And where does this null live? Isha asked as Ryuk gently shook his head. I'm not sure, but with the null war against humanity beginning, it's only a matter of time before it reveals itself, he said, his plan already forming in his head. Of course, Ryuk didn't know where it was yet. But if the nulls began to attack, it would one day reveal itself, and Ryuk knew well how it looked. In fact, those symbols in its eyes were still fresh in his memory. I will find it, Isha. I will find that null very soon, Ryuk mused to himself. But for now, Isha asked as Ryuk turned back to the sea. For now, we both simply lay low and let the world keep running itself. A step back from all of the noise. I know it's hard and won't be as adventurous as we know, but I'm afraid it's the best thing we can do now. The world doesn't need one more Dominion stage guy and a Grade A beast. It already has enough of those that I can foresee from when I went to the High Point's interdimensional gates. I think Endearth has enough strong Cataclysm stage experts. One more addition would be almost of no value. So instead of being unneeded or causing chaos, we sit back and let the world keep running on its own. Until I find that null and get our next objectives, Ryuk explained at length to Isha, who nodded her head before she flew up into the air. With a flap of her wings, she glided down to the sea surface below, her claws dragging on the water while winging around in the air. Ryuk simply watched from his sitting position with a smile before he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Raising his head, he found Morgane with a beaming smile, a tray of dishes in her hands, which she laid on the grass before sitting by his side. I figured you'd like the sight of a sea in blue and gold. You seem to have a thing or two with large water bodies, Morgane said to Ryuk, who nodded his head. The view is nice. I didn't think someone as brutish as you would want such a quiet place, though, he added, causing Morgane's eyebrow to quiver a little before she huffed. I'm not brutish. Whoever told you that is a big liar, Ryuk completed, as golden energy erupted from Morgane's hair. Listen here, you dickhead. Your guardian ain't here to protect you, meaning you're under my absolute control. You'd better behave, Morgane said with a bit of threat and sinisterness, as Ryuk turned his gaze to the side and smirked. Morgane followed his vision and saw that even though Isha was gliding in the sea about 100 meters away, its eyes were currently looking at Morgane with quite the amount of focus. Don't tell me Isha can hear us from so far away and understand you, Morgane said with a bit of shock. Ryuk nodded. It can. So you better behave, he replied. Morgane huffed and sat down, opening one of the dishes and stuffing food into her mouth angrily. Don't worry, I'm just one more stage before reaching the Cataclysm stage. Then, I'll put both of you in your place. Ha ha ha. Time moved pretty fast, the sun quickly setting until it completely disappeared, replaced by the moonlight. The stars began to appear, increasing more and more in number. The valley, which had been filled with the sounds of screams of dickheads and mocking laughter, eventually grew quiet with time. The only one who didn't seem to tire was Isha, still rowing around on the blue sea, icing some parts and seemingly trying to build some structure with her own ice. From up the hill, Ryuk's eyes gazed onto her humongous figure, a small serene smile on his face, one that truly reflected how he felt within. It was one of those rare moments when he felt a bit of peace inside him. These were moments he could count on one hand, each vivid in his memory. Like when he had passed the last phase of the Fallen tests, the final day before leaving for the Ascension Academy after his talk with the Half-Fallen One. Or the time he had told Morgaine goodbye, giving himself the chance to face the trial challenge and move forward without looking back. Those were the moments when he had felt burdens lift off his shoulders, and now he got to witness such a moment once more. His eyes looked at the stars, their light illuminating his face. But then he felt a hand tug on his shoulder. Lying on his back, he turned to his side and saw Morgaine laying on the ground beside him. "You see them better if you lie on the ground," Morgaine whispered. Ryuk turned his gaze back to the stars. She was right. "Tell me something, Ryuk," Morgaine said. "What's that?" he asked, turning to her. "Will you be going back to the academy?" Ryuk shook his head softly. "And why is that? Aren't the instructors at the Cataclysm stages?" Ryuk asked. She nodded. "Well, I already have Isha at the Cataclysm stage, which, being a beast tamer, automatically makes me at the Cataclysm stage as well. So, do I still need to be a student? You can still learn a lot about mana, combat, and other things. Isha might be at the Cataclysm stage, but you yourself are only at the initial plane of Dominion. There's still a lot for you to learn," Morgaine said. Ryuk paused for a while before grinning. Now he understood why Arthur had looked at him mockingly when he asked for the location of the pseudo-lord-ranked gate that Morgaine had entered. Ryuk was essentially only at the initial plane of Dominion stage. That was what people saw, and they judged him based on that. But Ryuk himself was much more powerful than that, and he would have no problem getting rid of even a Cataclysm stage expert. So, he didn't really see himself as a Dominion stage expert, though the rest of the world would look at him that way. The silence that followed revealed to Morgaine what she needed to know. "You've made up your mind, haven't you?" she asked, looking at the serene expression on Ryuk's face. It didn't seem like a choice he regretted making. "What about you, Morgaine? I trust you'll be returning to the academy soon," Ryuk asked. Morgaine nodded. "Yes, I would. What do you even want to do in the end?" "Huh. I mean, like, who do you want to be? An adventurer, going into interdimensional gates, completing quests? Or an instructor, teaching students? Or joining some company? Or maybe even becoming the spoiled princess of the fallen race?" Ryuk asked with a chuckle. Morgaine rolled her eyes. "Actually, I don't know. An adventurer would probably seem like the best choice since I have quite the experience with interdimensional gates. I've gone into them more times than I can count, and my experience is something some big companies would kill for. But I don't think I want to go into those gates anymore." "Why?" "Because every interdimensional gate raid is a dance with death. You saw what happened last time, didn't you? There are always anomalies. In some interdimensional gates, you can encounter vastly superior creatures that shouldn't even be there, creatures that can wipe out an entire group that should normally be able to complete those gates. In fact, I've heard of a group of Cataclysm stage experts losing almost their entire crew when they found a pseudo-eternity stage expert inside what should have been an ordinary Lord-ranked gate mission. It's just rumors, with not much proof to back them up, but still, that's what the gates are like. That kind of uncertainty, never knowing if you'll exit alive or dead. I don't want that anymore, because now, I have a reason to live," Morgaine said. "And what reason is that?" Ryuk asked, looking into her golden eyes. He watched as her face slowly turned red, the blush spreading down her cheeks until it eventually covered her entire face. Ryuk raised an eyebrow. "Hey, you all right?" he asked. Morgaine bit her lips, then turned her face away. When she returned her gaze to him, the red had somehow receded just as fast as it had appeared. It's a special secret reason, Morgaine replied. It was Ryuk's turn to roll his eyes. So, if you won't be an adventurer, what will you be? An instructor. No, I'm not good with people, and I still hate some bastards from the other races. To be an instructor is to be able to ignore differences in race. I don't think I can do that when I look at a damn vampire, Morgaine said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. But as for the princess part, my mom has been disturbing me to come back to the Eclipsed Citadel. She wants me to take the throne. Is she starting to grow old? Ryuk asked. Both of them giggled evilly. That won't be happening for another 150 years at least. But who knows? The elders wouldn't be against her decision. So with enough time, she might eventually be able to convince me too, Morgaine said with an uncaring shrug. Well then, Queen Morgaine Dominaire, I hope you show some mercy to the useless peasant when you ascend your mighty throne. Ryuk replied with a bootlicking expression as Morgaine humphed. Maybe if you start treating me well and stop being a dickhead, then I won't mind you being on the throne with me, she replied. Ryuk's smirk paused on his lips, and Morgaine's eyes widened in shock when she realized what she had just said, causing her face to turn a full peach red once more. No, I didn't mean that. I swear it, you dickhead, Morgaine said, reddening up as her fist flared gold, and she punched at Ryuk's nose, a sharp kacha sound resounding. Ryuk felt the sharp tinge of pain, causing him to hold his nose tightly. You did it again, Ryuk said, his hand moving to his nose, twisting it back in shape. His nanobots rapidly knitted it together, returning it to what it once was. You deserve it. For embarrassing me, Morgaine said unapologetically before laughing in mockery when she saw Ryuk roll a few centimeters away from her. You can't escape me, you dickhead, Morgaine declared, rolling after him. Soon, it became a rolling contest, which Ryuk quickly lost as Morgaine eventually caught up to him, pinning him to the ground with her body. Got you, she said triumphantly. Ryuk slowly turned his head to his waist before replying with a smirking, perverted expression. I think I'm the one who did. The words seemed to bring Morgaine back to her senses. She looked at her awkward sitting position, and her face grew red again. Scurrying off Ryuk like a startled rabbit, she pointed at him in outrage. You pervert. KCHA. Ow! You did it again. Ryuk groaned, feeling another stinging pain on his nose, finding it broken once more, only for his nanobots to quickly fix it. That's for daring to take advantage of the mighty fallen princess, Morgaine replied with a snort. Ryuk could only ignore her, but then, he suddenly remembered something. Hey Morgaine. Yeah. You remember what you said before I left for the trial? Morgaine's eyes seemed to pause in deep thought, but then, her eyes widened as Ryuk continued. Something about wanting to tell me something after I returned? No, Morgaine fired back, the shade of red growing on her face once more. Ryuk looked at her for a while before he sighed. Welp, seems like I was too late then, he replied, turning his head to the sky. But then, he felt the warm touch of a hand gently bring his gaze back to Morgaine. He found her face just a couple of inches away from his own. You're not too late for it, Morgaine whispered, her shade of red appearing once more. But this time she didn't seem to fight it back. So, what was it you wanted to tell me? Ryuk whispered back. The sound of a fast-beating heart echoed loudly, further carried by the breeze that surrounded them, sending strands of hair flying around. Ryuk didn't need to lower his gaze to know the source of the increasing heartbeat. It was none other than Morgaine's. But what happened next took him by surprise. A hint of reconciliation flashed in Morgaine's eyes. Like one who had finally decided to cast aside their fears, she suddenly leaned forward, and he felt a soft touch on his lips. Ryuk's eyes widened to their absolute limit as he looked at Morgaine, who had her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her red face. Slowly, the deep red faded into a light pink hue, and Ryuk felt himself giving in. His rapidly beating heart from the shock slowed down, his eyes gradually closing as he embraced the sensation. No word in the world could describe the feeling he felt. /n. Because unfortunately, the author is still a dumb virgin. Time passed, but it didn't seem to matter to either of them. After an unknown amount of time, they slowly separated. Morgaine looked into the dual-colored irises before her and gently whispered, "I love you." The words came as a shock to Ryuk. Even though his expression didn't clearly convey it, a louder sound of a beating heart began ringing through the silent area, coming from none other than Ryuk himself. "I love you. I love you." The words seemed to resonate through his head endlessly, filling his heart with a strange yet warm sensation. Yet his logical brain went to work. If those old men in grade E were right, this is what a confession means, even though I also seem to remember them saying the male does it first. But more importantly, do I love Morgaine? He asked himself as his mind flashed with images from the past. Images of his first time meeting Morgaine in the cafeteria. Images of their spar. Images of him in the fallen castle. Images of them leaving on the bus to the Ascension Academy. Images of their walk to the cafeteria in the Ascension Academy. And two more images that didn't seem to relate at all, yet held the answer to his question. One was the memory of when Ryuk had hurriedly retreated from Lydia, the female elf, when she had leaned towards him for a kiss. Why did I lean away from her and not accept her kiss? Why didn't I lean back when Morgaine kissed me? Then, another memory surfaced. You know, the bed is much warmer than the seats. Thank you, but I'm afraid a certain person wouldn't like that. It was when Lydia had asked him to stay on the same bed for the night, and Ryuk had refused her. A certain person? Had it been Morgaine all this while? Ryuk mused to himself. He hadn't really been thinking straight when he simply told Lydia that a certain person wouldn't want that. He had never even asked himself who that certain person was. But now, looking into Morgaine's golden eyes, the answer became clear to him. You know, it's fine if you don't feel the same. Morgaine tried saying when she felt the awkward silence and the strange pain that assaulted her heart. Slowly, her gaze dropped to her feet, a painful expression forming. But then, she felt a cold touch beneath her jaw. Ryuk gently raised her face back to meet those golden eyes. I think I like you too. The words struck Morgaine's heart like hammers, causing her to pause in shock. Then, without warning, tears began spilling from her eyes as she suddenly moved toward Ryuk, hugging him tightly. Only now did she realize the pain in her heart had been the fear of rejection. And as she melted into his embrace, that fear faded away. The sound of a low growl resounded through the area as Morgaine and Ryuk's actions paused. They both turned their heads behind them, where they saw a huge head staring down at them, its claws folded into a fist over its huge maw, while its snow-white eyes stared at them with a narrowed gaze. And immediately, they both succeeded in moving away from each other's embrace like frightened mice. What's happening here? Isha's voice resounded in Ryuk's head, as he scratched the back of his head, but before he could reply, he felt a body wrap around him tightly, as Morgaine's taunting voice rang out. He belongs to me now, she said, before racing off with Ryuk, quickly followed by Isha, who chased after both of them. Ice and golden energy erupted from the chase, and the one who bore the painful fruit of it all was none other than Ryuk, who could only helplessly watch as his girlfriend and his pet engaged in a battle of possession. 6 days later, the sound of a ringing resounded through the cozy room, where laid an ultra-large and comfy-looking bedroom with a total of 3 figures, one thrice bigger than the remaining 2. They were none other than Ryuk and Morgaine, but an extra presence was present, sleeping right in the middle of both, and it was none other than Isha, who acted as a median separating the two, while her claws and tail wrapped around Ryuk, whose eyes were opened, heavy bags underneath them. For the past 6 days, life had not been as peaceful as he wished. Dry-eyeing. Looking at his Apex watch, he saw the ringing in them, as a head stretched from the side, none other than Morgaine's sleepy eyes. Mad White? She asked, before stealing a quick kiss on Ryuk's cheek. Following the low growl of Isha, who stared at her with narrow eyes, eliciting a triumphant giggle from Morgaine. A kiss like that had not happened for close to 3 days now, and only a single giant-looking frost wyvern could be thanked for that. Ryuk rolled his eyes at their little banter before rising up from the bed, picking up the call. Thump. The door was gently shut behind him as he came before a medium-sized, but extra-luxurious living room. He picked up his clothes from the golden sofa amidst the sound of a voice from the other side. "What's up, kiddo?" Still snoring. Mad White's voice resonated from the other side, as Ryuk wore back his clothes before stepping out of the living room, the fresh morning breeze assaulting his nostrils, and he stretched his back a bit. "Just woke up. Sore as hell though. How about you? Done with the guns yet?" Ryuk replied, and then, "Kacha." He heard the sound of a gun being pulled, followed by metal falling to the ground. "Just finished the guns. The materials were quite a lot, so I made another version just for you. I don't think you're a gun-type person, though," Mad White said, as Ryuk helplessly shrugged his shoulders. "I've never used one before. Don't worry about it. You got yourself a gunslinger mentor after all. Ha ha ha. I'll teach you a few of my tricks when you get back. Speaking of which, just where are you anyway? Still in the academy?" Mad White asked with a raised eyebrow. "No, I've left the academy. I can get back in less than a few hours, though." "What's up?" Ryuk asked, as he got to the edge of the valley and took his seat, his snow-white hair ruffling to the rhythm of the falling blue sea waves before him. "Got a highlight from a dear friend. Seems like the leaders of Endearth have some information on where the next second null attack will be happening, and just like before, they're planning on deploying the human race army over there. Except this time, they'll be making sure no one can save the day." Mad White's voice resonated amidst the sound of a gun being slung and filled with bullets. "What are you planning?" Ryuk replied with furrowed eyebrows. "I'm thinking of paying them all a visit at the round table. Maybe get them to change their mind," Mad White said, as Ryuk rolled his eyes. "I don't think that'll be happening peacefully." "Who said anything about peace? If everything will go down in peace, then my new babies will have to starve. As a good father, I don't want that." "Don't tell me you're planning on crashing the party?" "That's quite a brutish way to put it, but I won't say it's very far from the truth. Still, I can't watch humanity be thrown to the front lines again. Can I? This time, I'm planning on knocking some brains into the 10 failures and showing them this isn't a war where one group will act as meat shields. As nauseating as it sounds, we all will have to band together to face this war. That's what I want to tell them. The next null attack, I guess, will be pretty devastating compared to the first. There's no time to experiment with playing chess at the front. We all have to band together soon to face them, and that's what I'm planning to tell them." "Fair enough," Ryuk replied. For what he had heard about the nulls from Astralexa, taking the nulls unseriously would lead to the wipeout of the entire Endearth. The 10 families to Ryuk were not taking it seriously enough. If they were, they wouldn't be sending humans on the front lines to see how powerful the nulls are, as that is just stupid. What they all need is some sort of eye-opening speech that will force them all to bind together, and it seems Mad White wanted to be at the front of that. It was something Ryuk didn't find that bad. Although, to change the view of the most powerful group on Endearth would require more than just a few words and coercion. It would be anything but easy. "So what do you say? Want to join in the fun then?" Mad White asked Ryuk, who inhaled the breeze once more to clear his head. He had been living with Morgaine for the past few days, but a week had almost passed. He knew, according to the academy rules, Morgaine would have to resume the academy today. If Morgaine leaves, he would be the only one in the place. There wasn't much to do than sit down and walk around a bit. So in the end, why not just join in on some convincing fun then? And this time, he might just be able to see who the people sitting down on the ruling seats of Endearth are. It would be a nice introduction to the true power of the world. That compared to aimlessly roaming around, Ryuk didn't need to think too much before making his choice. "Count me in," he replied as the sound of a gun getting slung rang out once more. "Good. Let's regroup at the Ascension Academy. The fun happens at midnight," Mad White said before the call went off, and Ryuk slowly placed down his watch. He exhaled snow-white air from his lips, a smile forming on his face before he turned back his head, finding a hot cup of coffee before his face. "Seems like you'll be getting busy soon," Morgaine said, sitting down by his side, as Ryuk gave a thank you before taking the cup of coffee. "Just a couple of minor things," he replied casually, but it didn't seem Morgaine fell for that as she looked at him with worry. "Minor things in that they won't take 2 years to complete, would they?" she asked him, and he shook his head. "That's in the past. I won't be gone like that again, I promise," he said, finally wiping away Morgaine's frown as she took a sip of her coffee, and they both looked at the endless sea before them. Suddenly, both Morgaine and Ryuk bounced off the ground for a few centimeters before slamming back down as a new figure appeared beside them. It was none other than Isha, a cup of coffee in her left claw, and in her right hand was a spoon, which before her huge claws appeared tiny. But Isha stirred the coffee, a serious expression on her face. Ryuk could see her side eyes were carefully watching Morgaine. "I swear, she just appears everywhere. You need to teach her some bit of privacy," Morgaine said with a bit of annoyance, looking at Isha with the same narrow eyes which she was using to look at her. Ryuk could only smile at their jealous banter. "What of you though, Morgaine? You haven't said anything about returning back to the academy in the past few days," Ryuk stated as Morgaine clicked her tongue. "I've been trying to distract myself from it, but really though I'll have to return today, or I'll have some of my points deducted. Not like I care about them anymore," Morgaine stated. It was clear to Ryuk. She didn't want to leave. "Seems like someone is getting addicted to my presence," he teased as Morgaine rolled her eyes. "Even in a million years. You won't get addicted to the presence of dickhead like me, yeah, I know," Ryuk completed for her, as Morgaine punched at his shoulder. But then, her hands met with a claw, none other than Isha who blocked the punch for Ryuk. "Heck!" Morgaine shot back as she punched at Ryuk's head, only for it to get blocked by Isha once more, and before Ryuk could say anything, it became a punching flurry with Morgaine trying to punch at Ryuk and Isha quickly blocking it all. The golden energy from her fists visibly agitated more as her anger once more started to rise. But then, the world swerved by suddenly, as Morgaine felt her punch connect to something, none other than Ryuk's face once more. Kacha. The familiar sound of a something being broken resounded as she watched Ryuk wince in pain a bit. "Happy now?" he asked before swerving his nose to their place, his nanobots getting to work in fixing it up, but the big satisfied smile on Morgaine's face gave him his answer. Looking down, she found herself in the cloud alone with Ryuk, and Isha's narrowed eyes looking at them from below. She had no idea how she suddenly reached this place. But then, it was finally some bit of privacy, and Morgaine couldn't let this rare chance slip by. With a single lean, she was onto Ryuk, her lips wrapping onto his, even as they soared rapidly downwards, and the world around her seemed to fade away under the softness. Times passed, before she finally opened his eyes, the gaze of his face and the green grass beneath his head awakening her. "Now I'm happy." The sound of growling rang out amidst her words, as Morgaine felt Isha's claws pick her up, turning her upside down in the air before disappearing off towards the house. But all she did was look mockingly at the frost wyvern with a triumphant expression. She knew well she had won this battle already, and Isha was nothing but a jealous mistress. "Okay then, we'll be leaving soon for the academy," Morgaine said from afar, before she was dragged into the house by Isha. Ryuk watched them disappear into it, before his eyebrows furrowed for a while, but then they relaxed. His eyes consciously looked to the clear blue sky, taking a huge inhale, but then, his face settled into a frown once more. "Somehow," Ryuk mused to himself, as his hands slowly reached for his heart, and right now it was thumping so loud. I feel fear," he mused to himself, closing his eyes for a long while. In his head, the dreams he had been having for the couple of days started reappearing. The dream of a white-haired boy being chased in the snow by unknown beings. That dream had only been appearing in the past, like once a month, but now, they were appearing every day in his dreams and his heart was pounding beyond normal. The fear he felt in that dream was starting to catch up to him in real life. It is starting to approach? Am I not strong enough still? If there was one thing Ryuk trusted to warn him of danger, it was his own body. The most basic indicator was his body hair rising when danger was approaching. But now, with his heart pounding so much in fear, he couldn't just brush it off as nothing. But how? He thought to himself. My strength is close to the peak of the Cataclysm stage. I am right now close to the peak of absolute power in End-Earth. Just how? How could I still feel fear from something that's not even in front of me yet? He voiced his thoughts aloud, a bit of anger and confusion in his voice. After he had exited the trial, he had thought himself to be truly strong now. He had believed he could find some peace. Yet now, barely a week later, he was feeling fear from something not in front of him. Who? A sharp inhale escaped him before it was released in a deep breath. In the next instant, Ryuk made his choice. Activate system interface. If his body felt fear, then that meant whatever was approaching him was scary beyond his current level of power. He could at least be grateful that his body could sense it. Now, all I need to do is not scream and get mad forever. If my strength now isn't enough, then the only thing I can do is to keep growing stronger. My potential is nearly limitless. If I feel fear, I'll just fill it up until the fear disperses. Ryuk thought as he opened his eyes to the flashing golden panel. System quest completed. Host's mentor has been locked up in the Titan City Pyramid Base, a high-tech device that could imprison anything with apex energy, rendering them to nothing but mortals while sapping life away from the weaker ones. Quest. Free Mad White has been completed. Rewards. 1. Plus 30,000 EXP. 2. Plus 2 level up cards. 3. Plus 20,000 purchase points. System interface. Name. Ryuk Null. Race. Half Null, half Jade Dragon. Class. Beast Sovereign. Age. 17. Apex Energy Cultivation Stage. Initial Plane of Dominion. Aetheris Energy Cultivation Stage. Mid-Stage. Level. 42. Total EXP. 57,000/43,000. Does host wish to level up? The system asked as Ryuk exhaled. I had previously taught myself that my current strength was enough to handle all my enemies. But now that my heart is beating so fast with fear, I'm not sure if I'm truly ready for all my enemies. I can no longer stop my growth. I have to continue if I plan on surviving. Ryuk mused to himself as he made up his mind. Before, he had stopped himself from using his attribute points and level-up cards because he believed he was stronger than his enemies. But now, that thinking had been wiped away, and he needed to adapt immediately. Yes, he answered aloud. Congratulations. Host has leveled up to level 43. Plus 20 attribute points allocated. Total attribute points. 60. Total EXP. 14,000/50,000. Level up cards. 7. Does host wish to use level up cards? Yes. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 44. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 45. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 46. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 47. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 48. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 49. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Congratulations. Host has used one level up card. Host has reached level 50. Plus 20 attribute points obtained. Total attribute points. 200. Stats. Strength, 300. Agility, 300. Mana, 300. Endurance, 300. Intelligence, 296. Charisma, 50. Luck, null. Total attribute points, 200. How does host wish to distribute attribute points? The system asked, as Ryuk looked at his points balance for a long moment. He inhaled deeply, his eyes glimmering up as he made his choice. Add 150 points to charisma, and add 44 points to intelligence. Congratulations, host. You have achieved a secret mission. All for charisma. Mission requirement. Deposit an equal or more than 100 points at once into the charisma stat. Rewards. The requirements of charisma only working on beasts have now been nullified. Host charisma now works on all living entities alike, irrespective of race or intelligence. The system notification suddenly rang in Ryuk's ears, whose heart had already frozen in pain. But then, he sat down there, rooted in shock. Ryuk's reasoning for adding all his stat points to charisma had been simple. He wanted to fill up all of his contracted pet space. If there was one thing Ryuk knew, it was that his ability to contract beasts and gain random skills was a very helpful asset. Normally, this skill would be weak at first, but with the existence of ability upgrade cards, Ryuk could vastly increase the power of his inherited skills even faster than his pets. Right now, he had planned on going around searching for beasts to fill his contacted space once he finished the mission with Madwhite. But then he had noticed his abysmally low charisma stats, which he knew well were a necessary requirement to contract beasts. Not all beasts would be like Isha, given to him as a gift and therefore easy to contract. But still, Ryuk's heart had lurched in pain. He knew well right now what he needed the most: strength and agility. To put so many stats into a stat that only worked for contracting beasts seemed dumb to him, even though he had argued that back then, his strength would increase once he gained more beasts and leveled up the inherited ability. Right now, he had undoubtedly broken a milestone. Now, his charisma didn't only work on beasts. It worked on all creatures. Humans, fallen angels, werewolves, vampires. So, wait, does that mean? Ryuk asked in sudden thought, his surprise clear. Yes, host. There is no longer a charm stat for you. It is now charisma. Oh, Ryuk muttered. Well, I guess they can't be that much different in the end. Stats. Strength, 300. Agility, 300. Mana, 300. Endurance, 300. Intelligence, 340. Charisma, 200. Luck, null. Attributes points, 6. Finally, some bit of balance, and my intelligence is now leading the front. Ryuk mused to himself before he focused. Now that his charisma was good, it was time to get on with the way he had planned on raising his strength, and that was, in the next instant, his eyes slowly closed, the air ruffling around his hair and the grasses beside him. But then, Ryuk himself had gone into a much deeper world, drowning him of the sensation. When Ryuk opened his eyes, he was faced with a world of ice and snow. It was none other than his pet world. But then there was a new presence. Ryuk could see right at the center of the pet world, the pet incubator. But right now, shadowy tendrils of energy were rippling out of it in waves, coming from the incubator, and his eyes narrowed as he slowly gazed forth. Arriving before the incubator, he could feel the suffocating aura of the void that seemed to reduce one's supply of oxygen, almost like a hand grabbing someone's throat. But he ignored the sensation opening up the cage. In the next instant, a blast of circular energy shot toward Ryuk, appearing an inch before his face. The attack had been incredibly deadly and very fast, happening the second Ryuk opened the cage. Perfect sneak attack, but still it was too slow for Ryuk. However, the attack smashed straight into Ryuk's face, causing his neck to jerk back behind him. He hung like that for a few seconds before his head slowly lowered back, a tiny cut having ripped through his eyes and binding them. But this still couldn't hide the small smile that Ryuk had on his face, his eyes shining with tender light as he looked at the tiny creature. Its body was hidden in an aura of shadow energy, but Ryuk peered through this energy, seeing the creature itself. Alas, it was a really tiny black cat, currently bearing its maw, which had no teeth or fangs, but another ball of dark energy that was quickly brewing. The creature's eyes were pitch black, its tiny claws peeking out and denting the pet incubator as it stared hatefully and murderously at Ryuk. Host can activate King's aura to eliminate the murderous aura and subdue the creature. The system chimed, but Ryuk shook his head. No, I understand. He truly understood the reason. It was because of his own neglect. Isha had told him the egg would probably hatch in around 72 hours or so. But then he had saved Mogrian and came here, forgetting about the beast. The same happened for Isha, who had also not returned to the pet world for days, deciding to stay in the outside world, forgetting about the void egg, which had already hatched and formed a tiny creature within the incubator. Imagine being born only to see yourself contained in a cage. The first natural reaction would be to fight it, which the creature must have done, judging by the various lash marks all over the cage. But it had probably failed to get out. That was why, when Ryuk opened it, its first instinct was to attack him immediately. He could employ the king's aura to instantly drain its anger, but he didn't think that was the best way to fix things. Instead, he stretched out a finger toward the cat, which immediately bared at him, the tiny balls in its mouth flaring even more in power. It was a clear sign of telling Ryuk to stay away. "Hey, system," Ryuk suddenly called in his head, his finger pausing in its motion. "Yes. Have you attuned the creature's attribute to my shop?" "No, host. It will be a waste if you're not planning to contract it." "Attune it," Ryuk replied, and a few seconds of system processing later, the process was complete. "Get me a void dish, perfect for it," Ryuk replied, as the system interface immediately flashed. The first dish caused Ryuk to take an inhale from how expensive it was, but he pressed down that feeling as he bought it. Ryuk's motion of pointing a finger suddenly changed as he looked at the creature, closing his palm, only to open it once more. But this time, the dark cat paused in its step when it saw the object in Ryuk's hand. It was a total of 3 small-sized, but still very big, dark ball-like objects. But they made the cat's pitch-black eyes suddenly begin retreating. The darkness in its eyes retreated, eventually concentrating into a single line of blackness, and around it was a blue color instead. Slowly, it paused, its inching foot toward Ryuk's palm, scenting his hands for a while, before suddenly it moved very fast. It used its claws, swiping off one of the huge balls before quickly disappearing behind pet incubator. A few seconds of gnawing resonated, as the dark cat battled with the huge, swirling dark ball, for about 30 minutes before the sound turned too quiet. It came out only to find the sight of Ryuk's still outstretched hand, still holding 2 balls. Once more, it walked cautiously toward Ryuk, eyeing him, while baring its fangs. But when it saw Ryuk remain motionless, with no sign of hurting it, it yanked off one of the balls, before once more hurling behind the cave. A few seconds of grinding passed before the cat came out. This time, Ryuk could see the huge bulge in its stomach, but he still didn't move, watching as the cat moved up once more. This time it was less cautious as it yanked off the large ball as usual, and 10 minutes later, it came, its stomach dragging on the floor, eliciting a bit of a chuckle from Ryuk when he saw the system notification. That's 3,000 purchase points gone in a poof. Talk about a greedy bastard. The cat eventually came out, looking at Ryuk's hand, which had been depleted of the balls, but was still outstretched. It sniffed his hands for a while, before it stared very long and intently at Ryuk's opened right eyes. In the next instant, it walked forward, scenting his fingers and climbing on his palm, before collapsing onto it. The aura of shadows surrounding its body slowly dispersed, giving way to the shiny dark fur beneath. In the end, it had eventually fall into a nap on Ryuk's palm. Surprisingly well-looking, better than I expected it to be. Seems like it was able to keep its consciousness in the end. Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at the tiny cat resting on his palms. He knew well that the creature before him was a bit of an exceptional case. It was the creature that the Rattleconda had tried to erase its consciousness and possess its body. It was a miracle it survived, due to Ryuk's early intervention, but he had expected the creature to come out deformed due to the circumstances of its birth. But looking at the dark cat, it seemed to be perfectly fine, its stomach gently heaving up and down in his palms. "Activate Pets panel," Ryuk ordered as the system flashed before him. Pets scanning beginning. Pets successfully confirmed. Congratulations. Host has successfully come across a void kitten. Scanning for hidden injuries. Scanning done. No injuries found. Void kitten seems to be in a calm state of sleep. Contracted space available. 10. Does host wish to contract the void kitten? The system asked, and Ryuk nodded his head. The system initiation flashed as he began the contracting process, finding it to be not much different from that of Isha. He bit into his lip, making a small shallow cut with his teeth. Runic lines slowly moved out of the opened wound, quickly spreading onto the forehead of the small kitten and burrowing into it, forming a small runic tattoo. Ryuk's red blood slowly dripped onto the tattoo, each drop causing the kitten's dark fur to darken even more, powerful life essence emanating from its fur. After dropping 5 of his blood essence, Ryuk stopped the blood from flowing. Another runic line appeared on his forehead, identical to the one on the kitten. After shining brightly for about 10 seconds, it slowly faded away. The tattoos disappeared from both the kitten's forehead and Ryuk's forehead, almost as if they had never existed. But Ryuk immediately saw the notification. Congratulations, host has successfully contracted a new pet, a void kitten. The system will begin attuning the pet skills once it awakens, and host's random obtained ability will begin synchronization. Does host wish to awaken the creature now? The system asked, but Ryuk shook his head. No need. I'll just wait until it wakes up. With that, the system notification disappeared, and Ryuk looked at the void kitten for a while, watching its vibrating whiskers before he turned to look at the pet world. Right now, he was standing at its center, which was a snowy world, made so by Isha herself. But the void kitten's attribute was shadow energy. He didn't think allowing it to stay in Isha's snowy area was a good idea, so he made his choice, temporarily laying the void kitten in the pet incubator. Ryuk summoned an object from his shop. A cave about 7 meters in pure height, none other than the Rattleconda's abode, landed onto the ground with a thump. But then, it began rising from the ground as Ryuk slowly walked away from the snowy area to a somewhat distant edge, where he placed the cave on the green grassland. Immediately after it landed, dark shadow energy began seeping out, turning the green grass dark until a 10-meter radius around it was covered in dark energy. Ryuk then brought out more tools from the pet world, none other than the void stones he had found within the cave. These were something the Rattleconda had been planning to use to boost its cultivation once it took over the void kitten's body. Alongside them were some dark-looking flowers that brimmed with void energy. Immediately, he got to work, and after 10 minutes, Ryuk clapped his hands as he looked in pride at his handiwork. He was within the cave, but instead of it being pitch dark, void stones were stuck across the walls and ceiling in a beautiful design format. The stones provided not only illumination to the cave but also vastly increased the amount of void energy present. On the ground, the dark flowers were planted with spaces in between, further increasing the void energy in the area while also remaining edible. The cave had been given a cozy aura, and Ryuk browsed the shop, soon buying an object that seemed no different from a king-sized bed, but with dark runic lines that absorbed the void energy in the cave and released it in a stream of void energy. Exiting the cave, he walked back to Isha's snowy area and brought out the void kitten from the pet incubator, making sure to store the damaged pet incubator into his shop. Then, he entered into the cave and laid the kitten down, covering its body with the mattress. Immediately as the kitten was laid down, the void steam from the runic lines in the mattress instinctively began swarming towards the void kitten, entering its body. Its fur began to brighten with a shiny dark light, and some runic lines appeared around the creature's forehead. The sound of a small peaceful snore rang out, and Ryuk looked at the kitten for a while before the notification appeared. I'm starting to wonder if you're perhaps the lost father of the Void Kitten, the system remarked, and Ryuk rolled his eyes before silently stepping away from the cave. Once he appeared outside, his eyes looked into the distance, locking onto his primordial tree. But when he noticed everything was all right, he removed his consciousness from the pet world, opening his eyes to the sight of the blue sky. The sound of a humming rang out as he sat up, looking behind him to find the grass seemingly retreating to the ground. And just a few seconds later, an object slowly levitated up from the ground. It was none other than Morgan's golden jet, which hovered above before floating upwards to Ryuk's side. The hatch opened up, and a hand stretched toward Ryuk from above. He grabbed it, raised himself into the jet, and the hatch closed back up before the jet instantly zoomed into the distance, quickly disappearing amidst the leftover golden energy. Am I late? Ryuk's voice resounded as he appeared on top of the skyscraper where Mad White sat down on his reclining chair, dressed in a gentlemanly white suit. His normally flowing white hair was well gelled and arranged properly, like a gentleman. And truly, right now, he looked just like a gentleman. Mad White slowly turned to Ryuk, a smile appearing at the side of his lips as he shook his head. You're just in time. You're dressed pretty well. That's rare. Ryuk commented, looking at Mad White, who was even donning an expensive-looking watch along with his shiny boots. Mad White rose to his feet, grinning wildly. It's an important meeting, after all. Here. A nylon pack appeared before Ryuk, and he caught it, the nylon disappearing with a little release of energy, revealing a dark suit and trousers. It was an official suit, just like Mad White's, except instead of white, it was dark, a color that Ryuk didn't particularly find fancy. Why dark? Because you're in the secondary role, Mad White said, a few more objects appearing in the air. Ryuk grabbed them all. Some were white finger rings except much larger, like 5 rings bound together. There was also an equally dark hat and a pair of glasses that were just as dark. The secondary role? Ryuk asked as Mad White cajoled him into a dressing space, locking the door before reclining onto it. Yes, Ryuk, you're in the secondary role. Mad White replied again as Ryuk slowly took off his shirt while rolling his eyes. Stop with me, Mad White. What's the secondary role? Let's just say we're both going on a heist. I am the gentlemanly thief with the briefcase, and you are the gun. So, you're the grab and I'm the smash? Ryuk asked and Mad White chuckled. Seems like your upstairs is pretty good. And while grab and smash seems like a pretty brutish way to put it, I won't say it's far from the truth. In short, I will do the talking, the convincing, and all of that headache. I know those old bastards very well, so I can best play their game. But as you can guess, simply talking to them won't do. So I need a person that can stand behind me and add a little bit of an exclamation mark to every one of my words. So you need a person to place the bullet in their heads while you try to convince them, and I'm supposed to be that guy. You know the hat is a round hat, right? It won't do a very good job of covering my face if I'm close by, Ryuk said as he wore the hat on his head. But it didn't do much in covering his face unless he lowered it. Never mind that hat. We're not hiding, Ryuk. It's just to add a little bit of menace to that girly face of yours. Do I not look menacing enough with my face alone? Ryuk asked as Mad White scoffed. You're anything but menacing. One look into your eyes, and one can tell you're still a naive little kid. If anything, I'd say you look more like a playboy instead. The kind that makes the old ladies wonder if they earn enough pension to get their hands on a new toy. Hey. Mad White teased as Ryuk's eyebrows twitched in the mirror before him. A bit of gel on his hair, and he got himself quite the look. A bit of messing around with his nanobots, and Ryuk watched as his body shifted from the lean, muscular type to a much larger frame. His dark suit only further accentuated those hard, muscular features. Not too bulky, but anything but thin either. He looked at himself in the mirror one more time, eyeing his face, which seemed to have gotten even more handsome, even to him. After a bit of winking his eyes at the mirror, he eventually lowered his hat over his head before exiting the door. How do I look? Ryuk asked, looking at Mad White, who stared at him for a while before grinning. What's with the bulking body? He asked. Well, do you prefer the girly one? Ryuk replied as Mad White shrugged. No, this is perfect. Just don't exhaust all of your strength trying to keep that form up, Mad White said as Ryuk shrugged his shoulders. He wasn't exhausting any strength, just a little bit of nanobot shifting. Here. Mad White moved to the sofa, and Ryuk finally saw the pitch-dark bag that Mad White slowly unzipped. Immediately, as the bag opened up, deep waves of crimson-dark energy emanated from the open zip and slowly rose as Ryuk looked at the object peeking out of the bag. It was twin pistols, crafted from an obsidian-like metal, with veins of pulsating crimson energy running through their sleek frames. The barrels were adorned with intricate carvings of howling spirits, releasing the illusion of deep, guttural whispers. And in Ryuk's eyes, he seemed to see dead spirits stretching their hideous red hands covered in blood towards him, causing him to unconsciously back off 2 steps. Mad White's hand slowly stretched forth as he picked up the pistols, spinning them in his hands for a while before settling. Silently, he dipped them into his gun coat, which was once again covered up by the suit. But then, it didn't seem like he was done. Ryuk watched as he dipped his hand into his pockets and brought out gloves, which he wore on his hands. Then, he slowly dipped his hands into the bag and brought them out, turning to Ryuk with an utmost serious expression on his face. Behold, the abyssal howlers, Mad White declared as Ryuk stretched out his hands, fingers hesitating for a moment before finally grasping the twin pistols. The moment he touched them, a chill surged up his arms, like ice-cold tendrils curling around his bones. A deep, guttural hum rumbled through the weapons, so faint it was almost a whisper, yet heavy enough to settle deep in his chest. The abyssal howlers, sleek yet jagged, their barrels appeared as if chiseled from blackened obsidian, fused with pulsing veins of shadowy energy that slithered across the surface like living veins of molten blood. The steel was unnaturally cold. Not just the absence of warmth, but a chilling presence, as if the weapons had been carved from the void itself. The runes engraved along their frames shimmered with an eerie, silver glow, reacting to his touch. Faint, distorted whispers slithered through his ears, barely distinguishable, fragments of voices, twisted and broken, pleading, laughing, screaming. The muzzles bore fang-like protrusions, their edges serrated like the jaws of a beast forever frozen mid-snarl. The grips were wrapped in abyssal leather, shifting slightly under his fingers, as though the weapons were adjusting, molding themselves to his grasp. A pulse ran through them, syncing with his heartbeat, and for a brief moment, Ryuk wasn't sure whether he was holding the guns or if they were holding him. These are mine. The Abyssal Howlers. Quite the badass name, don't you agree? Mad White said with a chuckle as he slowly removed his gloves from his hands and slipped them back into the bag. Fine by me, but I don't know what to say. These don't look cheap, Ryuk said as he looked at the gun in his hands, hesitating. Just from holding these guns, Ryuk could feel much more strength in them than even when he was holding his Nano Reaper scythe. These pistols are no doubt the highest grade weapons he had ever touched in his life, and Mad White just casually gave them to him? Neither are you, Ryuk, Mad White said, this time with a serious expression that prompted Ryuk to focus on him. I sent you to that death hole, Ryuk. And for us humans, power doesn't come cheap due to our lack of potential. Whatever little strength we get it through horrific pain. For you to come back from that hellhole, possessing the strength of a cataclysm stage when you were previously at the plane of ascension before you left, I can't possibly imagine the hellish pain you must have gone through. And even through all that, you didn't despise me at all for the pain. You simply saw it as your responsibility, not bearing even a grudge. And right after, I asked you to save the 7,000 human soldiers, and you did it, instantly heading to the location without any questioning at all. I had thought it would end there, but then you tracked down the location where I was caged and brought me out. Mind you, you could have accepted Nathasha's offers and left me, saving your own neck from the wrath of the Titan family. But you stuck by me without even the tiniest of doubts. You learned that 2 years had already passed, essentially ruining your academy life, and still kept your cool right after. And now you're offering to go on another mission with me, without even asking what you would get in return. Everything you've done, Ryuk, you never really look or ask for rewards. You saved those 7,000 humans, brought me out of jail, and didn't even ask for pay. Mad White paused, then looked Ryuk directly in the eye. Tell me, Ryuk, if there were a robot that listens and never questions, that fulfills missions without failing, that does everything without expecting any form of reward or pay, would that robot come cheap? Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows. The answer was a clear no. In fact, such a robot would be too valuable, priceless. So in the end, I can only make you what I do best. And that is crafting my literal best creation. The Abyssal Howler's material, you can't get them even if you pay for them. They are the type of treasures you get and store as a family heirloom. Every single metal, every single carving and line, even the trigger materials, are family heirlooms that can't be bought. So when everything came together to form the Abyssal Howlers, it became a weapon with no price. Mad White exhaled before finishing his statement. I believe that's the only way to repay someone who does everything without asking for a price. A weapon with no price, for one that does without a price. Now, that's interesting. Ryuk mused to himself before he held the weapon tightly in his palms. I'll accept it, Mad White. Good. There are a couple of naturally ingrained abilities in the gun, and you just need to input mana to activate them. But I can't really tell what exactly since I haven't laid my hands on the weapon. I have no idea how many abilities are on there, so you'll have to discover them yourself. That should enhance your familiarity, Mad White said, and Ryuk nodded his head. According to what he knew about guns, they usually needed bullets, but Mad White's pistols didn't seem to require any. The only explanation was that they used mana, although having ingrained abilities wasn't something he was expecting. Still, it would only be a matter of time before he figured everything out. Host can place the weapon in the shop store and I'll do a scan. I will then generate a new panel listing all its skills and abilities. The system's suggestion was great, and in the next instant, the weapon disappeared into thin air, causing Mad White's eyes to widen in shock. What just happened to them? He asked, and Ryuk raised an eyebrow. I stored them away. That's impossible. My creations are too high grade and can't be stored away in spatial rings. It would collapse the space inside them. That's why I keep them in my suit pockets. Let's just say I got a higher grade spatial ring in that death hole, Ryuk stated as Mad White chuckled. I won't call you lucky. Okay then, here's the plan, Mad White said as he sat down, and Ryuk sat opposite him with a serious expression on his face. Mad White's Apex watch flashed a light, and a holographic image soon appeared in the air, one of a gigantic building with an end that pierced into the clouds. This is the Ultra Assembly Base. It is where the meetings that decide the entire fate of Endearth are undertaken. Mad White began his explanation as Ryuk listened attentively. There are 20 levels, and the higher the levels, the greater the importance of the meeting. This particular meeting will be taking place on floor 12, which is exactly here, Mad White said, pointing to a particular floor that seemed to be around the middle of the entire building. According to reports, there will be a total of 10 individuals participating in this meeting, each one a representative of the top 10 families. These representatives will be around the peak of the Dominion stage or the Perfection stage. The chances of a Cataclysm stage expert appearing for a Floor 12 meeting are very low. I won't say impossible, though. And every one of them will come with at most 2 bodyguards each, who will undoubtedly be stronger than them. Most likely, those bodyguards will be at the Cataclysm stage. Mad White's expression was calm as he completed. So, 10 families mean 10 representatives, each of them coming with 2 guards at the Cataclysm stage. That means we'll be facing a total of 20 Cataclysm stage experts, excluding the representatives themselves. Doesn't sound like a piece of cake, does it? Mad White said with a grin, and Ryuk's furrowed eyebrows said it all. He was strong, but facing against 20 Cataclysm stage experts? Unless he went for the kill immediately, Ryuk didn't think he could do it without breaking a sweat. "Tell me you have a catch," he replied to Mad White, who grinned. "I do. You see, these floors, from floor 15 and below, only register a total amount of people before shutting themselves off from the outside world. In short, once those 10 individuals get into the floors, the doors will shut close and will never open unless willed from the inside. So, if the door can only take up to 10 people, that means those guards will not be coming in with them into the space. This was done before to ensure the security of the information being talked about. Even the Cataclysm stage guards aren't worthy of knowing, so they created this feature. Also, the floors themselves are a pocket space, so the meeting doesn't actually happen in the building. It's like a teleporter that sends them to an unknown location where they can discuss whatever they want without a single soul overhearing. In short, there might be 20 Cataclysm stage guards, but none of them will enter. They will all be standing outside the door. And also, if an attack happens behind the door, the guards won't be alerted since the meeting itself doesn't take place in the building but in a different pocket of space. Mad White paused, letting the information sink in before continuing. "So, our first mission will be getting through the guards and finding a way to sneak into the floor. Once we get into the floor, then no matter what goes down, none of the guards outside will be alerted. That gives us some time with the 10 leaders and enough time for bargaining," Mad White explained as Ryuk nodded before exhaling. "But you said the floor only takes 10 people, right? If both of us get in, that makes it 12 people. Will the feature allow that?" Ryuk asked. "Yes, it will. With this," Mad White said, bringing out a purple-colored card. "This is a space hijacking card. It eliminates the requirements in pocket space. With this hijacking card in my pocket, the rule that only 10 people can enter will be nullified, and both of us will be able to get in." "What's the risk, though?" Ryuk asked. "Well, the risk is the space hijacking card removes the need for only 10 people to enter, meaning that once we get in, then the limit of 10 people will be nullified. That means those guards, too, will be able to enter the space. But I'm betting on the fact that we will be able to sneak in so perfectly that they won't even know the space has been hijacked and that they can enter. They will all still believe only 10 people are allowed but have no idea that a space hijacking card has been used. The only way for them not to know is for us to sneak in so perfectly that they don't suspect anything and assume this is just another regular meeting like before," Mad White explained lengthily as Ryuk nodded. It was truly a risky endeavor, but compared to facing the guards head-on, it was a bit safer. The best result would be getting in so perfectly that the guards remained outside, unaware of the breach. It was risky but a solid plan. "That's possible," Ryuk replied as Mad White nodded. "Now, when we get through the guards and into the space, we need not be afraid of going all out and subduing them. Once we subdue the leaders, we can easily negotiate terms with them. After all, we have them on 100 points. You get," Mad White said with a bit of a grin, and Ryuk nodded. That was solid. They sneak in, subdue the leaders, and negotiate the terms. Your work is simple, Ryuk, but very important. You're to help subdue the leaders and place them under fear. You have to act like a machine, following each and every one of my orders without fail and never saying a word throughout the entire episode. I will do the negotiating, and you simply make sure the leaders have no choice but to agree in fear of their lives. I can easily keep silent, and listening isn't that difficult for me, but I won't kill people for you unnecessarily. So if you ask me to kill one of the leaders just to make the others agree to the requests, then I'm afraid I can't do that. But you can sever their arms, rip out their eyes, and watch me put a hole through their head without flinching. You can do that, right? Mad White asked as Ryuk shrugged. Anything but taking lives, I can do. Good. Then we'll have no problem. If I need them dead, I have a pistol. I'll just put them to death myself if they'd rather die than make humanity survive. I think we're both good, Mad White said as Ryuk nodded. But then, how do we get through 20 Cataclysm stage experts without getting caught? And what did you say the name of the building was again? The Ultra Assembly Base, Mad White replied. Exactly. If it has the word Ultra, I guess it must have its own guards protecting it and making sure no outsiders infiltrate, right? If we plan on getting into that door without anyone realizing something is wrong, then we have to make sure all of the guards are untouched. We can't kill, we can't hurt, we can't knock them out. Because once a body has been knocked out and discovered, they'll immediately know something is up, and the risk of being found out increases. So, how do we get through such a building with its guards, security systems, and protocols without being seen, and also get through the door where 20 Cataclysm Stage experts with ridiculous sensory power are stationed? Ryuk asked as Mad White grinned sadistically. Oh, don't sweat it. It'll be a piece of cake, trust me. You just worry about listening to orders, he said before standing up and heading back toward the room. Ryuk also stood up and followed after him, both of them finding themselves before a teleporter. Let's go have fun, Ryuk. The Ultra Assembly Base. It was one of the top-ranked buildings in Grade A, built hand-in-hand by the Association of the Top 10 Families. Here, meetings were undertaken by the absolute elites of all Endearth, discussing matters that influenced the lives of billions of Endiarthians. For that reason, it was also one of the most secure buildings ever. One that, in fact, had never been infiltrated before, as the top 10 families themselves were the ones who came together to construct it. If there was anyone powerful enough to infiltrate the Ultra Assembly Base, it could only be the top 10 families themselves. Even still, the number of guards protecting the building inside and out was nothing to scoff at, but compared to the security protocols, one could only scoff at the guards themselves. Truly an Ultra Base. A voice resounded from an area hidden within the dark clouds. Two figures stood there, cloaked by the darkness. One of them was dressed in white, while the other wore black, a shade so deep that he almost completely faded into the night. The only distinguishable feature of him was his snow-white hair. Looking downward from about 10 kilometers away, Ryuk could already see the gargantuan building. Right now, he also noticed various jets, the sleekest of designs, regularly going in and out of the base. It was nighttime, so there were lights that looked like lasers shining from specific areas of the enormous building, their beams rhythmically zooming across the sky. However, when Ryuk looked at those lights, which seemed to be some sort of illumination for the darkness, a tingle ran down his spine. Those aren't lights. I'm pretty sure they're used as cameras and are possibly lasers that eliminate anything that comes close. The building seemed free of obstacles, but when Ryuk focused his eyes on those walls, he noticed something. Almost invisible film-like barriers covered the building, and within those, a group of people wearing dark suits with a strange emblem moved around, scanning the surroundings. When Ryuk focused his gaze on one of them, his eyes scanned through the high-powered rifle the guard held in hand, the two more pistols strapped to his waist, a couple of ball-like objects hanging down and jingling by his belt, a total of 3 knife pockets, a full bulletproof vest, and a cloth that seemed thicker than steel. The guard also wore dark glasses that occasionally blinked with blue light, probably a vision enhancer. He was the very definition of armed to the teeth, and from Ryuk's standpoint, he could already see about 100 of them walking to and fro, hidden by the invisible layers of the building. There are probably another group behind the building, and then there is the building itself. Just how many guards are in there? Ryuk wondered to himself. But then he heard a call. Look at those jets. Mad White's voice drew his attention. Ryuk narrowed his eyes and noticed a couple of jets beginning to fly into the base, bearing various emblems. One of these emblems was a wing with a sword ripped between, an unmistakable logo representing the fallen angels. Other logos were also easy to recognize, like one that had the emblem of a snarling wolf, most likely belonging to the werewolf race. The top 10 families' leaders. They're here, Ryuk stated, inhaling as he looked at Mad White. However, Mad White instead had a wide grin on his face. Should we get going? Ryuk asked. No rush. The Titan family still ain't here yet. Besides, the meeting will take 2 or 3 hours to complete, and I want to see which floor the meeting will actually take place on. As he spoke, a dark glass appeared in his hands, nearly identical to the ones the guards in the building were wearing, except his had 2 red lights on the side instead. Wait, so you're not sure if it's the 12th floor? Ryuk asked. Mad White chuckled. I'm not 100% sure. It's all intelligence, remember? Humans can make mistakes too, and the leaders aren't robots. They might decide to change to another floor over something small, like one of them tripping on the stairs. I hope he trips to his death, though, Mad White muttered. Ryuk shook his head. Somehow he had a bad feeling about this. They're finally here, Mad White said. Ryuk watched as a jet, twice the size of the others, descended slowly onto the Ultra Assembly base, bearing the emblem of a spine. The Titan family, huh? He mused to himself as Mad White slowly took off his glasses, which vanished into thin air. The Titan family are the uncrowned strongest and the richest. That's why they can afford to use the largest ship and also come late. And also, they're humanity's biggest haters. Mad White cracked his neck and arms as he said that. Humanity's biggest haters, huh? I wonder why. Ryuk mused. Mad White replied immediately. I think the word is superiority complex or something. Don't you see? Among the top 10 races, the ones that look the most like humans are the Titans. In fact, the Titans are not any different from humans. They have the same hair, the same hands, the same legs, the same face. I mean, the werewolves might look like hairy humans, but once they shift to their true form, they become hairy dogs, an obvious difference. But the Titans, their true form is not much different from a tall human. The only difference is their spine. A Titan's spine can elongate and secrete an enzyme that gradually increases the size of their entire body along with the spine. That's what the human lacks and also made the Titans much taller. That creates their superiority complex, Titans thinking humanity is nothing but a lower, failed version of themselves. A species whose bodies can't harness the power of the spine to increase their growth and form. During the Dark Era, the insane experiments they conducted on humans in the name of trying to make us like them were nothing short of horrific. Eventually, they deemed humanity a failure, something to be disposed of. It's like taking a creature to use as a lab rat, and when it fails, deciding to dispose of it. Those guys are bastards. Trust me. Mad White's voice carried clear disgust. Now, it made sense why Mad White has asked why he didn't just get rid of the Titans in Titan City, instead opting to knock them out. All of the hate seemed to have originated from the Dark Era. Something Ryuk didn't really have any knowledge of. Just what did humanity face in the Dark Era? They're all here and they're using Floor 12 just as stated. We can get going now. Here, Mad White said as he stretched his hand out toward Ryuk. But then Ryuk looked at it and found nothing. What's that? He asked. Mad White responded with an action. He threw something, and Ryuk's eyes flashed when he suddenly felt something land on him. Instinctively, he grabbed onto it with his arms. But then, his eyes flashed in shock when he looked at his own hands and found nothing there. Yet, he could feel that something was indeed present. An invisibility cloak? Ryuk asked in surprise as he looked at Mad White and found his body was slowly disappearing until only his face was left. It's not just an invisibility cloak. It literally hides one in an invisible dimension where light can't pass through. Same for sound. Once you wear it, none of those security systems will pick on you. You have to be careful, though, because your feet aren't covered. They can still make some noise, but that shouldn't be a problem for you. The robe also nullifies existing sounds, although not completely, Mad White explained. Ryuk's hands quickly got to work, feeling the object. Soon, the image of a robe formed in his mind, and without hesitation, he quickly donned it. He watched as his own body slowly faded away. At the top of the robe, there was a hood that acted like a mask, covering his face. When Ryuk wore it, he was surprised to see that he now saw Mad White, who was also wearing the same robe. However, he couldn't see himself at all. The same could be said for Mad White, who was looking directly at him but likely couldn't see his own self either. This is insane. How did you even get your hands on these gadgets? Ryuk mused to himself. Mad White simply shrugged. Cultivation ruins. Now come, let's get going. Follow me. Mad White slowly descended from the ground and plummeted downward, but he soon maneuvered himself, seemingly gliding in the air. You can't fly? Ryuk asked as Mad White turned his gaze toward him. Ryuk remained as straight as a pine tree, yet effortlessly pierced through the air, following closely by his side. Let's just say my body isn't built for that, Mad White said. Ryuk looked at him with pity. Weird, all Cataclysm stage expert can fly. Must be a hard life. Damn. My bullets can get you even if you're in space. Flying won't do shit when my guns are out. Mad White scoffed. Ryuk rolled his eyes, but then his gaze turned steely as they neared the Ultra main base. He knew well that this was a serious mission. One mishap and everything would be ruined. This wasn't the time to joke around. Silently, they both soared down to the ground as lightly as a feather. Dropping down onto the ground of the base, Ryuk looked around the area and noticed that none of the guards seemed to have been alerted. Everything was still as it was. Calmly, he waited for an approaching group of high-ranked, rifle-wielding Endiarthians who were entering through the large glass doors. Swiftly and effortlessly, they slipped behind the last person in the group, sneaking through the gate and arriving in the base. When they entered inside, they found themselves in an incredibly large hall, where dozens of staff were present, attending to various men and women. Even though it was surely midnight, the way things were bustling here made it seem as if morning and night had no difference. With a signal, Mad White pointed to a group that was entering an elevator, and they both followed them in. The elevator soon closed up as one of the Endiarthians inside clicked on the number 7 button, and it rapidly whisked them upward. The elevator opened up, and the people exited. As soon as they were gone, Mad White calmly tapped on the number 12 button and waited. Immediately, the sound of the elevator opening up resonated once more. Ryuk and Mad White stepped out, but the instant they did, they instantly stopped. In front of them stood about 24 men and women, all wearing dark suits and glasses covering most of their faces. But what was truly horrifying was their cultivation base. Cataclysm stage. A total of 26 Cataclysm stage experts. Ryuk thought in his head as he watched the guards narrow their eyes at the empty elevator, which soon closed up before disappearing downward. The elevator is malfunctioning? One of the guards muttered. About 5 of them walked forward, scanning the space, but Ryuk and Mad White instinctively dodged their movements. Using their focus, they weaved through the crowd and arrived safely at the door behind them. They both waited for a while, watching as the guards glanced back at the elevator illuminating the walls. But in the end, they found nothing. It's weird that the Ultra main base would have a malfunctioning elevator. That needs to get fixed as quickly as possible. One of the guards mused while dialing some numbers on their device. But then, the wave of guards settled as they calmly remained standing before the door, seemingly waiting for when their leaders would exit. Ryuk cautiously inhaled, then turned to Mad White, who slowly brought out a card from his pocket and drew a rectangular box on the door. With a nod, he entered through it, followed by Ryuk. Quickly, the hole sealed shut behind them. Not a single rustle of air blew throughout the room, and none of the guards noticed anything at all. Their gazes remained locked on the elevator, completely unaware of the 2 infiltrators who had just dusted past them and entered the place they were supposed to be guarding with their lives. When Ryuk entered through the ripped open box on the door, he expected to instantly step into another space. But he was surprised when a strange sensation hit him. The sensation of traveling through space. The sensation lasted only a while, with Ryuk seemingly feeling himself floating through voids of space before suddenly being dipped into a random one. But when he opened his eyes, his eyebrows raised as he felt all eyes instantly fixated on him. Then, a voice rang out. Well, he's finally here. You've kept us waiting, Mad White. A group of high and mighty-looking people, their noses raised high above the heavens, faces holding pride, conversed around the big table. That was what Ryuk had been expecting, the same for Mad White, but what they saw instead was anything but close to the truth. Right now, all 10 individuals in the room were on their knees, bowing their heads behind the chair. And on the chair itself were holographic devices that revealed the displays of individuals who seemed to be the ones to take the seat instead. So they chose to send their representatives instead, while they connect here with the use of their holographics. Their main bodies are probably in some place in Grade B, relaxing in the moonlight or bathing in a pool. Tsh. Now this is harder. Mad White mused to himself. It would have been easy to convince the leaders by threatening them with death. Definitely, those old fogies had enough wild plans about the future, and what chilled them the most was death. But it seemed they had expected this move. Instead of appearing themselves, they had sent representatives and chosen to appear in holographic format. Without their main bodies here, there was no threat to their lives, and that would make any type of coercion very hard. I can threaten them with killing these kneeling representatives, but I know they won't give a shit if they lived or died. This mission has failed. Mad White mused, preparing to use a teleportation card and get out, but then something pricked at his consciousness. Just how? How did they know I would be entering? If they didn't come here with their bodies, they must have expected some threat to them, meaning they must have predicted me to somehow show up. Who informed them of my coming? Mad White's expression darkened slightly. Seems like you old pieces of shit have finally wisened up? I guess too many attacks really make one predictable enough, no? Mad White asked as he slowly stepped forward, removing the robe he wore on him. Ryuk had also noticed the robe seemed to have lost its effect once they entered the space, as each of the people in the hall could now see them directly. However, he remained where he stood motionlessly as Mad White appeared before the head chair, where the holographic image of a red-haired man with the same red-colored beard was seen. Mad White grabbed the holograph's hand and flung it away, sending it flying across half the room before landing on the ground. But it didn't shatter as Ryuk watched a vein pop on the forehead of the red-haired man in Tay holographics. "You inferior piece of shit!" he roared at Mad White, who didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he took the head seat and reclined properly with an exhale. "You know, you are quite skilled for a human, Mad White." A feminine voice rang out from one of the holographs. A blue-haired woman with pointy ears spoke, her eyes focusing on Mad White. "Time and time again, crashing the party, ruining plans, and costing us billions and lives in damage. You always manage to end pulling it off, no matter how impossible. We had thought the Titan City in Grade A would put you down for good. We made sure to eliminate everyone affiliated with you and strong enough to break you out. Honestly, I thought he would rot to his death in that Titan City." Another man with large, overflowing hair and a teddy with crimson red eyes said. Even though he had red eyes, he didn't have pointed ears, which meant he was a werewolf. Yet, you somehow managed to get out of that sure-death scenario, just like you've always done. I heard only a single Titan suffered, which is quite rare for you, but I know no way in hell have you repented for your sins. So, this kid here was the one calling the shots, huh? Mad White teaming up with someone. It kind of is your first time, but I guess this is also your first failed mission. A snort rang out and a blast of air echoed through the room as everything turned to the end of the hall where the holograph of the Titan Man was. His fate is to die alone in the end. He has gone solo all his life and will surely die solo in the end. That piece of shit. But then, the elf lady continued, since you always manage to pull off the impossible so many times, we thought, somehow, you would still manage to get across the 370 guards positioned in the Ultra Assembly Hall and find your way into the 12th floor. As impossible as it sounds, we know well now that perhaps that word has a very loose effect on you. So, in the end, another lady with crimson hair and eyes said, wearing an overflowing cape, cutting in, we decided to not appear in real body, choosing to go for holographs instead. It seems pretty shameful that people like us need to be in holographs to avoid our plans being ruined by you, but it seems like that choice was the right one in the end. I'm just curious about one thing, though. A voice suddenly resounded, coming from a very handsome fallen man with long, shining golden hair. His voice echoed repeatedly, like three men were talking at the same time as the entire hall quieted down. Do you really think you could have somehow managed to threaten us with our lives? Do you think you can take us all on at the same time? The entire crowd watched as Mad White's poker expression slowly changed into an incredibly wide grin. It brings me so much joy, Mad White said between laughter. To think you pompous bastards would decide to go in holographics just to avoid my wrath. How much joy it brings to me. Ha 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 ha. You ask if I think I can take you all head-on? Mad White said as his hands slowly came out of his pockets, bringing out his guns. Isn't the fact that I am here, sitting with my pistols in hand, yet you all are hiding behind holographs, enough of an answer? Mad White's taunting question bounced off the walls of the area, echoing loudly, making it impossible to argue against. His point made absolute sense. Here he was in his physical body with a pistol in hand, yet the leaders had chosen to come in holograms instead. It might have seemed like a precautionary detail, but then it really showed the intricacy of things. Finally, I get to confirm that you all are spineless cowards, Mad White said, reclining on the sofa as some of the leaders had their eyebrows quivering, while others were visibly unruffled. "Tisich, you piece of shit!" the red-haired titan roared out loud. If he wasn't in the holographic state, it was pretty clear that hell would have already broken loose between him and Mad White. So, now that you all are obviously hiding away and I can't threaten you with your pathetic lives anymore, I'm just wondering about my next action. Should I just destroy all of these pathetic holograms and then kill off all these kneeling wastes of space? Mad White said, as Ryuk watched the representatives kneeling on the ground quiver in their boots. But they all remained on their knees, heads bowed. They're useless to you in the grand scheme of things, aren't they? I mean, if you plan on sending them to face me, then you must be pretty damn sure they won't survive. But you deployed them anyway, which means you don't even care for the lives of your own. Not like that takes me by surprise anymore, Mad White said as Ryuk's eyebrows knitted. His gaze secretly scanned the leaders, but he noticed there was not the slightest ripple of emotion in them. They really planned on getting rid of their own without a blink at all? Just what is life to these people? Ryuk thought to himself, even though he remained as emotionless and silent as ever. That will be too much of a waste, Mad White. A thick voice boomed through the holograms, revealing the face of a dwarf with brown hair splashed in with streaks of gray. One gazed at him, and he seemed to be the oldest amongst everyone in the hall. "Shut up, Jonas!" A voice blasted from the side as everyone turned their attention to the Titan man. "Who cares if some group of pathetic lives die? You dwarves need to learn to grow and see the bigger future," the Titan man said aloud, causing the other leaders to knit their brows at the red-haired man's outburst. "Listen here, you inferior piece of shit. Do you want to hear some good news?" the Titan man said, chuckling vilely as he spoke. "I bet you as well want to do. Well then, Mad White is here. Let's begin the meeting." According to our calculations, the first null attack had taken place in Grade B, Evidin Plane A area. But somehow, an unknown force appeared and thwarted that attack, also saving the 7,000 human soldiers that were sent into the war in the first place. The Titan man's voice reverberated through the area. "For weeks now, we have tried finding any source that we can use to uncover who this unknown force is. But now, I don't think we need to find out who it was, as who else could it be if not one of Mad White's goons?" the Titan man said, as everyone focused their attention on Ryuk, who remained motionless and still. "I've heard from Natasha that there was a boy whose power level seems to be the same as that of Mad White, if not greater. And somehow, Mad White got out just after the null attack was thwarted. And this kid here must have done it. I don't know which hellhole Mad White must have gotten you from, kid, or what experimentation he must have done to you to make you so strong at such a young age. But if there's one thing I do know, it's that there are thousands of people who are enemies of the Titan family, and each of them has been eliminated one by one. Most have decided to ally with Mad White, but they have all faced their end. You have chosen to go against the Titan family. Therefore, it's only a matter of time before you face your death. An excruciating and painful death, like the thousands that came before you." The man threatened fiercely, his voice rising out loud with power, causing even the walls to shake from the sheer might. Yet the leader's eyebrows only remained knitted. The young man still didn't move a muscle at all. He just remained standing as he was, his hat covering the upper part of his face and keeping his expression unreadable, almost like he was deaf to the threats. If you choose to keep mute now as a sign of regret, it is still too late. You will be wiped out soon along with Mad White. The man threatened even more, but all he got back was silence. Anyway, a multiple-toned voice rang out, as attention turned to the golden-haired fallen man. We have been able to track down the approximate location that the next null attack will be coming from. Porion City Sky, Grade D, the man said. Ryuk's eyes flashed, but he didn't think he knew the place. But the same couldn't be said for Mad White, who had a th escape his lips. As you can guess, Mad White, the werewolf said, Porion City has a concentration of 70% humans and 30% mixture of other races, the highest concentration of any humans in any city of Endearth. Now, won't you agree that it seems like even the heavens are backing the destruction of the human race? Ha ha ha, he said, laughing boisterously. But then, a calm female voice rang out. This time, we've decided to free the human and soldiers form our palms, and we won't be giving any orders to the human soldiers that you care so much about, Mad White. Now, we'll simply leave the human leaders to their own devices. Obviously, if they wish to save the largest concentration of their race on Endearth, then they will have no choice but to deploy the human soldiers. If they don't deploy them, at least 60% of humanity will be wiped out from the face of Endearth with Porion City's takeover by the Nulls. And this time, we will finally get to properly assess the power of the Nulls, something your goon deprived us of the last time. And maybe also get to finally reveal to the world that the Null attack has started. Death and fear is the fastest way to gain some riches and power after all. Tsh, you bastards! The low muttering came from Mad White himself, followed by the grinding of his teeth, and Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. It was the first time he had seen Mad White lose his cool, but it only further showed that the situation was likely the most terrible situation he had ever faced, for him to lose his composure. A place holding 60% of humanity's population. And if my guess is right, the next null attack will be no less powerful than the first. If the first one was already enough to make 7,000 human soldiers perish, then would they be able to handle the next? Without any form of support from the 10 families, not only would the human army be wiped out, but Porion City would also be overtaken by the Nulls, and most likely, humanity would lose 60% of its population. If 60% of humanity's population is gone, then that is essentially an extinction-level event. That's truly bad, Ryuk analyzed with furrowed eyebrows as he tilted his hat. But then the boisterous laughter rang out. Ha ha ha! So much joy I feel. To finally see Mad White's cocky face painted in anger and horror. The sadistic laugh came from none other than the red-haired man, who seemed as happy as a foolish child. Well, inferior piece of shit. The humanity you loved so much has finally been released under the grasp of the 10 families. In fact, from now on, I swear on my Titan ancestry that we will never bother the humans again. Hey, tell me, inferior piece of shit, isn't this good news? But somehow you're not smiling. Hey, the Titan's man's boisterous laughter continued like he had been hidden on laughing gas, laughing uncontrollably with joy. It only made the sound of Mad White grinding his teeth grow louder as he slowly raised his gun and pointed it at the holographic device, about to blast it apart. Do your worst now, Mad White. Let me see if you can pull off the impossible and truly save humanity from its extinction. Hee hee. The man said, and then, boom! A powerful shockwave ripped out as a crimson bullet shot out of Mad White's pistol. The shockwave spread out with every single inch of the weapon's movement in the air, sending the kneeling guards flying into the wall, the large table evaporating to dust, and the floor cracking from the explosion. The bullet continued forth, reaching towards the holographic device, but just before it could reach it, a hand appeared and blocked the bullet. The sound of iron crashing against iron resonated as the gun ripped through the snowy white hand, blood splashing through the area, and it tore out from the other side, only for a second hand to grab it and stop it dead in its tracks before suddenly, boom! The hand exploded into nothingness, causing a powerful spray of blood, and everything quieted down. The jaws of the leaders were on the ground, the same for Mad White, who paused motionlessly as he looked at Ryuk, who had a gaping hole in one of his hands, and the other hand had been pulverized into nothing from the wrist up. But the holographic device was safe, and the red-haired Titan man was still in the room. A light hum escaped Ryuk's lips as he looked at the holographic. Warning! Warning! Host's regeneration has been slowed down by 60%. 5 more shots and the host will lose the ability to regenerate at all. Mana. -100. Endurance. -70. So this is why Mad White's power? How horrifying! Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at his arm, which was slowly regenerating at a snail's pace. But he directed his attention away from that as he rose upright, followed by the angered voice. You! Have you gone mad? That could have killed you. Mad White's disbelieving roar rang out as Ryuk exhaled loudly before asking. Seems like our mission is a failure, so I think I can speak now, right? Ryuk asked Mad White, who clicked his tongue as he stowed away his pistol, seemingly afraid of even shooting it again. Don't even bother trying to convince them. They won't listen to you, even if you agreed to sell your soul and become their eternal slave, Mad White said as Ryuk shrugged before he turned to look at the leaders, taking off his cap and fully revealing his face. Ryuk willed, and the system notification appeared. Host's charm effect has been activated. Good. Good day, 10 family leaders. Ryuk greeted as the leaders turned their attention to him. Somehow, they would normally have mocked his body and ignored him, but there was something about him. Something that drew their absolute attention and caused them to remain silent, listening to his words. Some of the female leaders even had a slight blush at the edge of their cheeks, although it was absolutely unnoticeable. His handsomeness? How can a human be this handsome? You see, I'm not really Mad White's goon as you may think, Ryuk said, giving a sidelong glance at the red-haired Titan man, whose eyebrows furrowed before he snorted. TCH, coward. Trying to bail yourself out? It's too late, the man said with a mocking smirk, but the next words silenced him. My relationship is much deeper, as I am Mad White's first and only personal intern in the Ascension Academy. He introduced, as some of the leaders' eyebrows furrowed, and one of them murmured, Mad White's personal intern. They thought in silence before their eyes suddenly flashed. Wait. There truly was a rumor of Mad White getting himself a personal intern in the Ascension Academy, the elf lady said. But wasn't that 2 years ago? And didn't he die not long after? The werewolf man said, as the leaders narrowed their eyes at Ryuk. The rumor that I died is not absolute. In fact, Mad White sent me to a portal, an unknown cultivation portal, which had been deemed impossible to be opened. But as you all know, my mentor is of the impossible type. He was able to pull it off and get me into that portal. I spent half a year within, but upon exiting, I learned 2 years had passed. 2 years in an unknown and never-before-entered portal. Who wouldn't think I died? Are you trying to say you're a deeper enemy than we thought you were? The red-haired man said with a huff, bringing attention back to Ryuk, who calmly shook his head. No, I'm not insinuating that. What I want you to understand is that I have been through that portal, and within it, I have learned quite a few things and also monumentally increased my strength. If I may ask, Mad White, what was my power level when I left for the portal? Ryuk asked, turning his attention to Mad White, who furrowed his eyebrows before responding. Around the core stage of the plane of ascension? Mad White asked, as the elders furrowed their eyebrows. I came out of the portal just a week ago, and a few seconds later, I called up Mad White, who revealed to me that the human army had been sent to war with the Nulls and asked for my help to stop them in any way I can. Just as you all have guessed by now, I was the one who closed up the portal. But I'm curious, my cultivation is only at the initial plane of dominion. Aren't you all suspicious as to how a kid closed a null gate within just a few minutes, and also busted Mad White out of one of the most secure prisons in the world? In fact, even rumored to possess Mad White's own power level, which is obviously at the Cataclysm stage, while he himself is only at the initial plane of dominion? Ryuk asked them, as the leader's eyes furrowed, scanning Ryuk's cultivation base, and in the next instant, their eyes widened in shock. Impossible! He's only at the initial plane of dominion? In fact, he just broke through Revently too. How? The red-haired man asked in shock, a vein popping on his head from anger, as the other leaders also had their eyes wide in pure shock. They knew well, they might have just gotten their hands on a kid who had even more horrifying potential than Mad White, and this was enough to send the red-haired titan into a vein-popping rage. He had just managed to gain a first victory against Mad White, and now there was another monster lying in wait. Of course, I'm not saying this to make you all fear my power or my potential, whatever it may be, or to make you think there's another headache on the level of my mentor to deal with, Ryuk said, turning to the red-haired man whose eyes flashed. I'm saying this for you to understand something very important. When I left for the portal, I had a power level of the core stage of the Plane of Ascension, and mind you, I was 16 at that time. That is a pretty average cultivation level for a 16-year-old. Is it not? I mean, I know I am very far from being the number one when it comes to cultivation as long as I can remember. Your various family geniuses had a cultivation base higher than mine. Yet, on entering the cultivation ruin, and in 6 months' time, or to be more believable to you all, in 2 years' time, I've reached a power level of the Cataclysm stage? Is my point enough to show how high level this cultivation ruin that I entered is? Ryuk asked them, as they all looked at each other. A cultivation portal that can take an average talented kid from the Plane of Ascension to the Cataclysm stage in a matter of 2 years is at a never-before-heard level. Even top-ranked interdimensional gates cannot drop a lot that will take an initial stage expert to the Cataclysm stage. That means whatever cultivation ruin this boy must have gone into, it must have been pretty out of this world. Your point is well understood. Such a cultivation ruin is truly out of the world. The dwarf man in the room said what was in the leaders' hearts, as Ryuk nodded. But then, strength wasn't the only thing I gained in that ruin, he said as silence unconsciously covered the room, and all of the leaders absolutely had their attention on him. Same for Mad White. For truly, he also didn't know what the hell Ryuk had gotten into in that portal. But now he was saying he didn't just grow strong, he also gained something else? What else could it be? It was the same question through the minds of the people. I gained something better than power itself. What is it? The red-haired man said, his curiosity driving him insane, and Ryuk didn't delay much. I found a being. A being? Mad White was the first to ask. Yes, a being. The one who created the entire cultivation ruin. He replied calmly, slamming the truth into their heads. But he continued. And as you all may know, even a Cataclysm stage expert may not be able to build a city with their elements, let alone an entire cultivation ruin. So you all can guess what the cultivation level of the being who created that entire cultivation ruin is. The Eternity stage. You found a being at the Eternity stage? The werewolf man said in shock. But then they all tensed as Ryuk slowly shook his head. Huh. I didn't just find her. I brought her back to Endearth. What? Boom. Shockwaves undulated powerfully from the noise as the holographic panel of the leaders screeched. A sign that they must have all unconsciously lost control of their power, while beneath Mad White, the floor cracked into nothing as he shot up to his feet in shock, his eyes widening in terror. An Eternity stage being had been brought to Endearth. That was more horrifying news than the Nulls attacking at all. What did you say you just did, Ryuk? Mad White asked as he unconsciously walked toward Ryuk, grabbing him tightly by the shoulders under the shocked silence of the leaders and the representatives, who were all lying at the end of the room, their eyes also widening in shock. Tell me, Ryuk, tell me you're just bluffing? He asked, the exact same thing that was on the minds of the leaders, as their hearts unconsciously began pounding loudly. But then Ryuk replied, I'm not, Mad White. I truly brought her in.